so excited. I'm waiting for 3 friends and we're going to take an adventure today. We are going to one of my favorite places, and you may have been there if you live around Boston like we do. And if you haven't been there, you may know it from this book. It's called Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. And in this book, there's a duck family that finds a new home at the Boston Public Garden. I was thinking that we're all part of a really big family. And it's bigger than just the family you live with at home. It's the whole world. So today we're going to go to the Boston Public Garden and we're going to see what surprises we find by staying connected to each other and to what we find while we're there. So come on along.
I wanna quack, quack.
Okay, let's go. Ready? We're going to, where are we going?
Public Garden!
Yay! Oh, here it comes. Stay right here, guys. Hold on. Hello. You guys, let's take a breath together. Are you ready? Put hands up. Breathe in. Breathe down. One more time. Breathe in.
That's right.
We're going to explore the public garden and make our bodies into the shapes of the things we see. Well, let me tell you why we are at the garden today. Yoga can mean connection, and a lot of times we talk about breath and body connected. But you can also be connected out in the world. And when you stay open to what's around you in nature or in your day, surprises can happen. Come on up, can you do it? Yes, all right, high fives. Look who we found as our first surprise, Magic. Who's this? Belle, do you want to show makeup? Let's see Belle pose. Can you guys do Belle pose?
Belle pose.
Take a big breath.
Can you guys all spin with me?
Wow. Good job. So let's do tree pose. Hands can go up. Where can your foot go? We're up. Breathe in. Breathe out. Can you grow roots down into the ground and balance while your arms wave in the wind? Going over a bench is way more fun than going around it. How many ways can you be a goose? Can you take a breath in and a breath out? Notice the bridge? How many ways can you shape your body like a bridge? Take a breath in and out. You can also do a low bridge on your back. You can even lift the drawbridge up. Notice the thin instrument. Can you make your body into an instrument and play music? See the statue in this empty fountain? Notice how we made that shape. Look, this row of duck statues is from the book Make Way for Ducklings. Squat down. What does your duck look like? See if you can make sideways ducklings. Beautiful. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let's do the other side. Switch to the other side. Breathe in. Breathe out. Now we're going to stand up tall. Notice how many duck shapes we make. Now we're going to fly together. Are you ready? Fly, fly, fly. Whoa. I wanna
Quack, quack.
I wanna
Quack, quack.
Even ducks take a break on a bench or flop. One more time. Breathe in. Breathe out. Can you be a running duck? How about a silly running duck? Let's run to the pond and fish. Feeling strong in our bodies. Where do you feel strong?
Thank you for coming.
Yep, and what else?
I'll be kind to you and you'll be kind to me.
High five! All right, great job, you guys. Don't fall in, Sophie. Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCluskey. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. Next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting at its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all round the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies. With all those horrid things rushing about, we'll have to look somewhere else." So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice, quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael any more, because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Quack, and then Lack, then Mack and Knack, and Whack and Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them to walk in a line,
to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. There they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk went the horns on the speeding cars. Quack went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 quack went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks," yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick!" Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned into Charles Street, with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack all marching in line behind her. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well, now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street, right on into the public garden. Inside the gate, they all turned round to say thank you to the policemen. The policeman smiled and waved goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long, they follow the swan boats and eat peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. The end.
You know, one thing I noticed while we were there were the geese, the ducks, the swans, and there were pigeons. And even though they're all different birds, they all got along wonderfully. And it's kind of like how we are as people. We're all different, but we all live in the same place, like the same public garden. And we can all get along if we use our breath to connect to ourselves and then connect to our world.
Egg in nest. Breath ball.
And out. More in and out. All right, lift one leg up. And can you lift it up? Ooh, or you can grab your toes. It's hard. You can leave your knees bent, right? Breathe in. Maybe straighten one. Down, like a paddling a boat. Paddle your boat.
Swan.
Feet out. And maybe you can lift your feet up Stay right where you are. Breathe in. Breathe out.
Tall bridge.
Ready?
Duck
Breathe
wing
in
twist.
and down. And then look at me. And duck wing twist. Breathe in. And out. In. Out.
Gooseneck.
Out. In. And out. Breath in. Breathe out. And raise your hands up. Breathe in. And then fold over, breathing out, and sway like a weeping willow. Take a breath in. Breath out. Hands together in front. Take a breath in. And swing your bell.
Ding dong,
Ding dong. Ding dong.
Duck paddle.
What is that? Duck paddle? And down. All right, make a fishing pole. And you lift up your fish. Is a fish down here? Trying to catch the fish? Wait, can you catch your fish? Your fish. Did you catch your fish? You caught it behind you like this? Did you catch it like that?
Yep.
Uh-oh, I'm falling in the water. Oh no!
Flying duck.
And then lift your leg behind you. See if you can find your balance. It's okay if you fall. Maybe you flap your wings. Maybe. It is, right? Forward.
Dancing duck.
Keeping your balance, keep breathing. And then you do the best you can. Keep trying. Find one place to look at. Keep your eyes there. Whoa!
Partner boat.
Over here. This is stuff. And this one there. And then press
Low bridge.
and lift up into bridge pose. And stay up here, breathing in and out. In and out.
Thanks for joining us at the Public Garden today. My name's Sophie. Bye.
And my name's Miss Elizabeth. Thank you for coming. We hope to see you again on MagicMat. Bye.
Bye.
High five. No, high five again. Try again. This one. There you go. That was fun. Thanks, Sophie.
Make a duck.
Didn't get that on. Say that again. I
I
can't
said
hear
I
you.
can't hear you, Lori. I have ducks in my ears.